Stacy, I'm so excited to have fun with my family this summer, getting outside for hikes, bike rides, roasting s'mores over the fire pit.
Oh, it sounds like so much fun. And you know what else it sounds like? A lot of bug bites.
We do get our fair share of bug bites, and those are not fun. If even just one kid gets one super itchy bite, it can ruin the whole day, or even worse, keep them up all night. But this summer, I'm prepared thanks to All Better Co.
All Better Co. is a plant-powered first aid brand, and they just launched with their Don't Scratch That line of products, including first-of-their-kind patches and handy pens for itchy bug bites. The company was founded by two moms who wanted to make all-natural plant-powered topical solutions that are safe for everyday use and also powerful enough to actually work, calming bug bite irritation and inflammation.
I'll be carrying All Better Co.'s Don't Scratch That kit on every adventure this summer. Their kit includes their Don't Scratch That pen, which is made with just enough premium hemp-derived CBD to soothe the skin, making it easier for us to heal ourselves, and Don't Scratch That patches to seal in the relief and protect bites from scratchy little hands, and they're infused with soothing tea tree oil, so by the time you take them off, there's nothing to scratch.
The patches are individually wrapped for on-the-go use, but are also great for nighttime.
An added bonus is that both products don't just make the itch better. They nourish your skin with moisturizing ingredients like jojoba and coconut oil.
Used together, the All Better Co. pen and patch are a powerful duo that you can bring anywhere summer fun takes you.
Learn more about their premium hemp-derived CBD at allbetterco.com. While there, use our exclusive code DIJFY20 for 20% off any product. That's allbetterco.com, code DIJFY20 for 20% off. Moisture is the enemy of long-lasting produce. So if you have a clamshell, that can look like taking the lid off and just setting a paper towel on top, and then closing it and like storing it upside down. So basically all the moisture wicks down to the paper towel and keeps your greens fresher longer.
Welcome to Didn't I Just Feed You?
A podcast about feeding kids.
Hi, I'm Megan.
And I'm Stacy, and our summer of solutions is in effect. If you're caught up on our most recent episodes, this is the second episode in our summer season. Through the first week in August, we're going to be serving up shorter, super focused eps that help you cook smarter through the hectic summer months.
Today, we'll be talking about keeping summer produce fresher longer. But real quick, before we get into that, I want to make sure that you know about the Didn't I Just Feed You community, the happiest place on earth. Okay. Maybe not quite, but certainly one of the most helpful. You can join for free with nothing more than your email address and get access to our community boards where thousands of other busy home cooks lend help and share their tips, ideas, favorite recipes, the ultimate home kitchen hive mind, if you will.
And if you're able to contribute to Didn't I Just Feed You, you can join as a supporting member. There are several ways that you can support us, from just $1 a month to help keep weekly Didn't I Just Feed You episodes free for all, to membership levels that give you access to 2 additional bonus episodes every month, a way to text us directly, and our recipe archive. Get all the details at didn'tijustfeedyou.com/community.
Okay, well, let's talk about summer produce. I want to make the distinction that this week we're not talking about preserving summer produce, because we are going to do that later in July. We're going to talk about all about freezing, canning, jamming, whatever you want to do to preserve produce. But
does
this
that
is
get
like
you hot? Canning, jamming, preserving.
I mean,
I feel
can
like
you not
love
see it on
Yes.
my face? Yes, I do love it.
I know.
But this episode is really to talk about, okay, you came home from the market. You came home from the farmer's market, you scored in-season peaches, and maybe you bought too many. Oh my gosh, I do that every summer.
Every summer. And you're like, shoot, I have to figure out like how to make these things last as long as they can so they don't go bad before we can eat them. And some stuff is especially tricky, like peaches and berries and even those like gorgeous heirloom tomatoes at the farmer's market. So do you have thoughts about where we should start? Are there general rules for keeping summer produce fresh? Yeah. So I nerded out and did a little bit of research on this one because I wanted it to be really super helpful.
I mean, I'm hot for that.
Okay, here we go.
A little bit of research. Okay. Woo, where's my fan?
All right. So the first thing I'm going to say is super obvious and weird, but you want to start with fresh fruit in the first place, right? So especially if you're going to the supermarket versus the farmer's market, like look for things. If you're buying something and it's already super ripe, you have fewer days. But if you buy something that just turned ripe or still is a little bit firm, that peach isn't totally soft under your thumb, that's going to give you a little bit of extra time. If you're buying something that's underripe, then you have to make sure that you help it ripen in a good way that's going to bring out the best in it. So it kind of depends on what you start with. So be strategic. I like to buy a few things that are like perfectly ripe so that I can eat them as soon as we get home or in the next day or two. And then things that are just ripe and about to turn. But those are the products that you're going to have to think about. And the three things that you think about, according to the data, are temperature, ethylene, which we'll talk about, and airflow. Temperature is really interesting. We can talk about things as we go through specific summer produce about like what you keep in the fridge versus what you keep on the counter. But then you also want to think a little bit about where in your fridge you keep things. We talked about this during the pandemic, Megan, that we recommended that people crank their fridge up just a notch because the colder the fridge, the longer the produce would stay. And everybody was like, we don't know when we'll be able to go to the supermarket again.
Right.
That's still great advice, although summer produce is much more delicate.
Right.
So tomatoes, we're going to myth bust on this because people used to say you can't put them in the fridge at all, ever, never, never.
And that is not right.
Correct. That is not right. You can sometimes. Fresh herbs are really great. But with delicate summer produce, you do want to make sure that your fridge isn't freezing cold.
Right. Because you might end up with a ruined batch of peaches or a ruined watermelon because the back of your fridge is freezing.
Yes, totally.
Yes. It's happened to me a couple of times. Also, I think temperature is important to talk about in general, not just speaking about summer produce, because your room temperature is much different in the summer than it would be in the winter. And so you need to have some different strategies for storing even the basics that are like maybe not as seasonal, like sweet potatoes and onions and all of that stuff.
Totally. So the general rule of thumb is that the top part of your fridge and the back of your fridge are the coldest. So the middle is a great place to store like herbs or more delicate produce. And then thinking about a lot of fridges now have temperature control in the drawers.
Right.
So thinking about how you use that. Ethylene is something that I mentioned, especially if you're going to be using your produce drawers, you want to think about this. Any produce that you're going to put together, whether in a produce drawer or in a bowl on the counter, you want to group like high ethylene producers and low ethylene producers. So ethylene is a gas that some fruits, such as apples and bananas, naturally release. It actually hastens the ripening process. Okay, so if you put bananas, which emits a lot of ethylene, with, I don't know, lettuce or broccoli, ethylene
a lot of times
sensitive.
You see it with the avocado. They're like, ooh, this is how you ripen your avocado quickly, is put it in a bag with a banana.
Yes. So like that's to help it ripen. But when you have things that are ethylene sensitive, greens, lettuce, broccoli, what you're actually going to do is cause that to ripen and eventually rot faster. So you want to keep those things separate. Airflow, we talked about. Airflow is just, produce that keeps best at room temperature needs air circulation. And plastic bags are actually great for produce that you want to keep in the fridge. It actually reduces premature spoil. So even if the bananas or potatoes or onions you bought came in a perforated plastic bag, those are the high ethylene. They're going to last longer if you take them out and let them breathe. Whereas the other things you do want to keep in a plastic bag, and we'll get more specific as we go. But that's what you just want to be thinking about. You want to be thinking about the temperature, the ethylene, and we won't get too detailed. It's just like bananas, apples, like there's just a couple of like real culprits, if you will. that you want to be mindful to keep separately. And then that good airflow, what you want to keep out in the open and what you want to keep in a bag.
We should be able to link to some resources too. So we don't have to go over like a extensive chart of things to store together or separately. You mentioned, and I know I brought them up too, but like onions, potatoes, bananas, and I don't really think of those as summer produce. So can we talk specifically? Let's start with tomatoes.
Yes. I want to talk tomatoes, peaches, melons, berries.
Okay.
Because that's all the stuff that also just seems to go faster, right?
I agree.
Tomatoes.
Quite controversial. You know, for a long time, food media was like, never, ever put your tomatoes in the fridge. And as recently as like the last 2 years, there's been a lot of like New York Times, Kenji wrote about that, like for Serious Eats, this idea that refrigerating is not refrigerating is only important if you're trying to ripen the tomatoes still. So if you get something from the farmer's market that's not fully ripe, or you're bringing in tomatoes from your garden and they're not fully ripe, having them at room temperature is important. But once
it's very important.
Yes.
Yes. That's where you want to keep them.
Yes. But once they're ripened, they can go in the fridge. And this whole thing of like, oh, if you put them in the fridge, they won't taste as great. Well, that's true. Cold desensitizes our taste buds. So if you eat a cold tomato, it's not going to taste as flavorful as a room temperature tomato. So you have tomatoes that are ripe, but you want them to last a little bit longer. You put them in the fridge, but then when you want to eat them, you should take them out and bring them to room temperature for best taste.
And that's it. The one thing that you want to know about tomatoes, whether they're on the counter or in the refrigerator, is to store them upside down.
Wait, what?
Yeah. That's the wisdom. So the stem part is upside down, and if you can, on a paper towel.
Why?
That helps it too. Because then you won't get the soft spots.
Okay.
And that's just the wisdom. You know, when you put them down on their bottoms, like they'll get a soft spot. But because of that indentation, it creates like a little rest. And then also moisture will come out from the stem part. Like that's the place where moisture will leak before you've cut the tomato. And so the paper towel captures it. I mean, here's the thing. Moisture is what causes rot. Anything you can do to capture moisture is going to help you keep your produce fresher longer. So upside down in a paper towel is ideal on the counter, at the apex, put it in the fridge, and bring it to room temperature. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yes. I don't know why it's so cute to me to picture the little tomatoes on their paper towel bed, like turned upside down. They're like, I'm just going to take a little rest while I ripen. Okay. So what about peaches? Because even though peaches and tomatoes are not related, I think of them as sort of the same sensitivity and like the same ripening thing. Like I will keep unripe peaches out at room temperature together. And then when they're ripe, move them to the fridge for eating.
Yes. The one caveat there is that a lot of people recommend that once it's ripe and you put it in the fridge, you also put it in a loosely sealed plastic bag.
Ooh, interesting. Okay.
And that will help give you a little bit of time.
But you also probably want to make sure that they're dry before you put them in a plastic bag,
Yeah.
even if, you know.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a little bit of a thing, not to go too far off track, but people are unsure about when to rinse their produce and when to not. Which I would say as like a guiding rule, it's better to not rinse things until right before you're going to eat them.
Absolutely. Although berries, there are two
camps.
Exactly. One more thing about peaches, which actually I'm going to amend to be stone fruit. I think that should be our rule for stone fruit in general. So this includes plums and apricots. We're cherries. I was going to tackle cherries separately. So with the stone fruit, we're saying on the counter until it's ripe, then in the fridge, if you can, loosely sealed plastic bag, but be aware of the moisture. And the thing that I wanted to add is putting not ripe stone fruit in a paper bag and sealing it up on the counter, just like rolling it closed on the counter. If you want to expedite ripening, that will take like 3 to 5 days.
Great. I love that.
Okay. Do you want to get to cherries first since we talked about them?
I mean, yeah. I'm like, how are they different? And I mean, I know how they're different from other stone fruit and from berries, but like, how am I storing them differently?
So what I read about cherries is that you just always want to keep them cold to keep them fresh. So they go straight in the refrigerator once you brought them home. And the key is to not wash them right away. So I know people like to, like you said, wash ahead of time, but that excess moisture, there's so little and they're all bunched together when you store them for efficiency's sake that it's going to be really, really hard to get all the moisture off. If you just are like, I'm a prepper, I like to unpack, prep my veg and have everything ready to go. Okay. But then lay those cherries out. I mean, like really do it right. Put out kitchen towels, lay the cherries out for a long time to make sure that they are completely dry before you put them back in a bag and then in the fridge. And that's the deal with cherries.
What if you wanted to prep some for eating, like for kids snacking, making that super accessible? I get the idea of like whole cherries, I'm going to wash and dry. If I'm going to wash them, I'm going to dry them really well. But would you say the best advice is like to maybe only dry and pit what you can eat within a day?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
For sure. I mean, and that's great. And absolutely, we're not discouraging you guys from doing that stuff, but we're talking about when your mindset is about keeping the produce as fresh as long as possible.
Yeah. Which that's something to think about is like, okay, I'm going to take half of my peaches, half of my cherries, and I'm going to store them for optimal freshness for a long period of time. And then I can take the other half and prep for eating really quickly.
Yeah.
Or like what I can eat in a couple of days as a strategy if you're trying to prep a lot of things this summer. Stacey, real quick, let's take a break to hear from this week's sponsor.
Megan, we might not be feeding babies anymore, but based on feedback from our baby mama listeners, they are as excited about Amara Organic Foods as we are.
I'm not surprised. Baby food options may have changed over the years, but the fact that parents want what's best for their babies never changes. Even though we're no longer feeding babies, we love that Amara offers delicious baby food with the most nutrition as affordably and conveniently as possible.
And in the most inventive way, their baby foods come in an on-the-go powder. You just add water, breast milk, or formula, mix and serve. This allows you to customize the texture of your baby's meal, which is ready in seconds.
You end up with a customized puree that has all the taste, textures, and nutrients of fresh purees. Pretty amazing, right?
Totally. It might sound wild, but when Amara Organic Foods founder Jessica realized that by removing the water content from fresh foods, she could retain all of their nutrients and flavor without having to boil them to death, she partnered with an infant nutritionist to turn these super powders into a less processed baby food that is 100% organic, non-GMO, and plant-based.
The most exciting part is that these powders make it possible to serve up quality organic foods at more affordable prices. Amara costs less than $2 per meal, which is less than the leading brands.
It's no wonder that Amara was voted best baby food by The Bump, Good Housekeeping, and What to Expect.
Learn more at amaraorganicfoods.com/DIJFY and get 20% off their online shop using our exclusive code DIJFY.
That's DIJFY for 20% off any purchase at amaraorganicfoods.com/DIJFY, short for Didn't I Just Feed You? Can we go to melon? I feel like nobody talks about melon enough. I love melon.
Anytime I buy a melon, I'm eating it immediately.
Yeah.
Because I don't have room in my fridge to like store a whole ripe melon. So if it's ripe, it has to get eaten.
Okay, so that's funny because I keep my melons on my counter because of room. Like I'm not even thinking about keeping it fresh. And then inevitably I let it sit. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so ripe. Like I've actually cut up melons that are so ripe that they are too sweet. You know, they get that like crazy sweet, soft texture.
Yeah.
It's like they're on the edge.
Yeah.
I don't mind that. My kids are like, oh, no, heck no.
If it's like to that sandy point of ripeness, it's
a
no for me.
Beyond.
It's agua fresca at that point.
Yes, totally. But anyway, that's the deal. You do want to leave melons. They're a lot like tomatoes in that way, where you want to leave them at room temperature until they're ripe. And then you can pop them into the fridge whole before you've cut them. And they will keep about 10 days at a cold temperature. But again, like the tomatoes, you put it in the fridge right when it's ripe. And then you take it out when you're ready to eat it because you've extended the ripeness. You've extended the life of the fruit. but you want to get it back to room temperature when you eat it again. In my opinion, that's going to bring out maximum flavor, just like with the tomato.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I love cold melon though.
I do too. Like I like cold watermelon, but sometimes I like cold melon if it's ripe and then I've cut it up and then I put it back in the fridge. And I like those cold chunks.
Yeah.
But when I'm cutting it up like whole, like if I've taken a whole cantaloupe and I've put it in the fridge to like make it last longer and I want to eat it right away out of the fridge and cut it up for the first time, I do like to bring it back to room temperature.
That
But
is
then I'll
very
take
particular.
leftovers. I know. And then I'll put the leftovers in the fridge and then the chunks can be cold.
Okay.
Isn't that weird?
This is going to be an interesting thing. I wonder if people respond like on Instagram or in the community, like how, because it's very specific and it's totally an aside from like how to store produce. It's like how to eat your
Yes,
summer produce
totally.
for the
How do
most
your kids
optimal.
like?
Cold. They're cold melon kids.
It's like a band. That's their band's name.
Yeah.
So Mike doesn't like melon at all. My kids like really cold watermelon, but honeydew and cantaloupe and other melons like that, they like both ways.
Yeah.
But it really is more flavorful at room temperature like tomatoes.
It is, but sometimes room temperature, especially honeydew and cantaloupe, can have sort of like a vegetable funk flavor to me. Not like oniony, but almost, dare I say, mushroomy, almost like,
Interesting.
I don't know. Yeah.
Interesting. I'm
Okay.
going to like wait and try to taste that.
Okay.
I'm intrigued by your taste buds, Blonde.
I still love it. I
Okay,
still eat
yeah.
it. But it makes me understand why there are some kids who really love watermelon, but then like won't touch any other melons because there is the like vegetal thing.
That's funny because Mike doesn't like melon. He will eat watermelon. Like that doesn't bother him. He's not like, oh, I can't. It's gross to me with cantaloupe and honeydew, but it's like really not his thing. But he doesn't have a sweet tooth. Like he likes vegetal stuff. So I wonder what it is for him.
Very interesting. Okay.
What next?
Berries, I feel like are a really big thing. And then we can't leave without talking a little bit about corn.
Yes. I totally agree. And can we also just talk about leafy greens? Even though that's a little more evergreen, I do feel like in the summer, those big piles of leafy greens are so tempting for all the salads we say we're going to make. Maybe do, maybe don't.
I make a lot of salads in the summer. Does my whole family eat salads in the summer? Not necessarily. But I like
But you
them.
like them. Okay.
Yes.
But are you buying the leafy greens at the, I know you love a bagged salad.
I love a bagged salad. I love a clamshell of like baby kale or I'm really into this baby romaine mix that's like red leaf. But in the summer when there's like there's bib lettuce, like the big gorgeous heads of lettuce, whether we're using them to do wraps or for salads, I buy them all the time. Yeah. And even mixed greens in the spring and summer from the farmer's market. I feel like they're more flavorful.
Yeah. So I agree with you.
Arugula,
so, okay. Let's just talk about leafy greens because we're here.
We're here.
We went there. We've arrived. Let's talk about it. So how do you store your farmer's market? Not the pre-washed clamshell or bag salads. How do you store your greens?
Just being really honest, in the bag.
Okay. How should we tell everybody else to store their greens?
We have this great tip that we shared on Instagram before where it's like if you have a clamshell, and I think that this also works in a different way for a bag, which is just this idea that moisture is the enemy of long-lasting produce. So if you have a clamshell, that can look like taking the lid off and just setting a paper towel on top.
Yes.
And then closing it and like storing it upside down. So basically all the moisture wicks down to the paper towel and keeps your greens fresher longer. I do think that you can do the exact same thing with a bag, like line the side of the bag with paper towels and then store it on that side.
Can I add something to that before we go on to another method? Which is that there is also this phenomenon where if you put the paper towel in the bag or in the clamshell, whatever it is, and you again keep leaving them for a long time, which happens, greens can over dry.
Yes.
which does cause wilting. And if you start to see that happen, it usually happens in little spots. And you can just go in and pick out any like slimy leaves or leaves that are turning brown so that that doesn't create even more moisture that creates a domino effect. You can kind of just like tend to your greens here and there, and that will actually give you a couple more days.
Yes. The other method I was going to mention, you see a lot with stemmed herbs like parsley, cilantro, etc., is like laying out the greens on a long stretch of paper towels and gently rolling them up onto each other in sort of like a cinnamon roll style, and then storing that within a loosely sealed bag. You don't want to, like a lot of, I think there's a temptation, especially with hardier greens like romaine, to like wash and then store them that way. I don't do that because I think you just wash before eating as habit for everything is easier to remember. Like, oh, did I wash this?
Yes,
did I wash
totally.
this? And there's always the chance that you didn't dry your romaine well enough and then you get it wrapped up in a paper towel and it's going to rot with any excess moisture on it.
Right. So it's like the cherries. If you really, really want to wash your greens ahead of time, you need to get them really, really dry if you want them to last, if that's your goal. But yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, if you keep your greens, like if you come home from the farmer's market, you're not going to prep, you're not going to wash, you're not going to do anything. Sealing them in a zip top plastic bag and putting them in the fridge is great. Adding that paper towel is great. And then just kind of keeping an eye on them.
Yes. Every time I go into my greens, I'm like checking for baddies. I'm like, oh, you're a little yellow. Get out here. Because
I love that. I love the vision of you doing that.
Yes.
You're like, I'm here for coffee, but hold on.
No,
Are there any
like,
little baddies? I know.
Like I'm making a salad. I'm like, okay, are there because I feel so bad to fully admit this, but I feel like hopefully it's relatable. As soon as there's like a little pocket of slimy greens, like especially with spinach, especially with arugula, I'm out. Like that's it. I'm done. I've already in my mind that whole entire clamshell is rotted. So I have to like be on it so it doesn't get to be big enough rot for me to be like the whole clamshell is going in the trash. It's being burned. Get rid of it.
That's so funny. I bet my kids wish I was more like you. I don't know. There's like, I don't think of myself as being particularly frugal isn't really the right word, but whatever this is that I'm about to describe. But there are some ways that I feel like, you know, I'm like a child of wartime, or maybe it's an immigrant kid thing. I don't know. It's something. But I will literally like dump out the greens and like pick out all the slimy ones. And I'm like, this is good. The rest is good. And like one time I remember I was picking out the greens and like nothing was left. And Isaac was like, dude, you picked out more than half. Like, this is done. This is over. And not only that, like, even if you serve it to me, I'm not going to eat it. Like, those greens were over. And I was like, no, wait.
I'm Isaac.
Yeah.
Like, once I know, I can't unknow it. And so then I'm like trying to eat the salad, even if the greens are clean. Like, I've picked out all the bad parts. I've rinsed them and dried them. I'm like, was that like a little slimy bit in my mouth? It totally turns me off.
That's amazing. Okay. Corn and berries.
Yeah. I think we should talk about berries. I really only have one thing to say about corn. All I want to say about corn is anytime you can store it in its husk, it's going to last longer, which I know is like disappointing because it's such a mess to remove the husk. And like a lot of grocery stores provide a giant trash bin for you to like husk into.
Yep.
So then you can like take your husked corn home. It just doesn't keep as well that way. Like nature made it its own packaging for it to last a long time in, and you should just keep it in that.
There you go. Sorry. That's what I had to say too. The one thing I did read was that some people say that you should put your corn in a plastic bag and then in the fridge. Either way, the husk is the first original plastic bag. All right. So berries.
Yes. All the berries.
Who's going to start?
I want you to start. Are there categories of berries? Are we talking specifically about the like big three?
Yeah. Okay. I think that's what I'm thinking about. But then there's also like, I don't know, gooseberries are a little bit different. I think, think about anything that fits in the strawberry, blueberry, raspberry category.
Great.
So boysenberries count, or marionberries if you're out in Oregon. Wide, flat container helps so that they're not too piled high on each other, because that's when there's more moisture. Also, that's when one goes moldy, you've seen that in the berry container, and then it catches on and it clumps together. So wide, flat, lined with a paper towel, also great to help absorb excess moisture. Then you want to cover with a lid, but instead of sealing it shut, loosely lidded fid actually helps better because it keeps it sealed enough, but there still allows excess moisture to escape. Because berries are smaller, because they pile on each other, there's just much more higher, and they're a higher moisture fruit, and they don't have any like thick skin. You can't completely eliminate moisture. So a little bit of breathing room, we talked about space and airflow at the top of the episode, really matters here. So that's the rule of thumb. Wide, flat container, lined with paper towel, loosely fitted lid in your fridge. I also, though, do the pre-wash on berries sometimes.
Okay.
So I've heard, this was something that we learned when we spoke to Ro, and she spoke to us about the jar method.
Right.
Which is an old school method of keeping produce. A lot of people who swear by the jar method actually cut up and prep all their produce. And the idea is to cut it up, prep it, get it as dry as possible, and then put it in a glass container with a tightly fitted lid that can be like metal, glass. Also, I've never seen a glass lid with a glass thing, but a plastic lid. Right. And that people swear that this keeps so much of their produce, not just berries, fresher for weeks in some cases.
Yes.
I've only really tried it on berries, and it really does work. Where you wash all your berries in a solution of 3 cups water to 2 tablespoons of white vinegar. And the idea there is to kill any kind of mold or bacteria that might be lingering on your berries from just being out in the field. Okay, so I literally take a big bowl, I put in the water and the vinegar, and then I dunk all my berries, and I let them sit there for like 10 or 15 minutes to let the solution work and like really soak in there. And then you have to dry the berries. But again, this is serious. It's like we said about all the other fruit. When you're going to pre-wash, you must really dry them. So like I line, my whole kitchen counter is covered with kitchen towels. I pour the berries out. I pat them dry. They're in a single layer, and I leave them to air dry for like a couple of hours because I really want them to be dry. And then I put them in the container, sometimes without even the paper towel, but you can add the paper towel too, but you don't want them to dry up too much. And then the loosely fitted lid and put them in the fridge.
And you find that works for you for all berries, even raspberries? I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around raspberries getting washed around and then tumble dried.
Totally. Yeah. But what I do is you dunking them in a big, huge bowl of water. So they're not, you're not rough handling them. You kind of dunk them in the water, and then they're kind of soaking. And then you can just kind of with your hands scoop them out of the water and gently lay them on the towels. And that's where with strawberries, you could take a second kitchen towel and kind of roll it on top and help accelerate that drying process. With raspberries, you're not going to do that. You're going to damage them. So literally you gently put them on the paper, on the kitchen towel, and then you're leaving them to dry. It takes several hours, truly, to get them dry without damaging them. And then you gently put them in your glass container.
Okay. I'm too lazy for all that.
Yeah.
But I do like the storage, like wide flat storage, paper towel lining. And then we just rinse everything before we eat it.
I will tell you, I know you said you're too lazy for all that, but if you go berry picking, it is a game changer. The berries stay much longer, stay fresh rather, much, much longer. So if you have a ton of berries, which does happen from time to time in the summer, I do think it's like a, once or twice thing. It might not become part of your everyday process, but it is really great.
Okay. I'm going to trust you, and I'm going to try it this summer. I feel like we covered the big produce. Yes. But you know who else is going to have even more questions, tips, and ideas for us?
Always.
our Didn't I Just Feed You listeners community. We hope you've joined us there. If not, join for free at didn'tijustfeedyou.com/community. Or if you want those bonus episodes and other new goodies, join our supporting community. You can also keep in touch with us on Instagram, where we are at Didn't I Just Feed You, or by signing up for our newsletter.
And of course, don't forget to subscribe to Didn't I Just Feed You wherever you get your podcasts. Or if you're already a subscriber, leave us a rating and review. Those bring us such joy. They also help other busy home cooks find us.
A huge thank you to our editor, Samantha Gatzik. I'm Megan.
And I'm Stacy. Stay sane and well-fed until next week.
Be sure to subscribe to Didn't I Just Feed You wherever you're listening. And don't forget to rate and review.